Hi everyone. This week you're going to look at research proposals because you've already done your IRB applications. And one of the questions I get a lot is, what is the difference between a research proposal and an IRB? So I've designed this slideshow for you so hopefully you can understand the differences. I have another PowerPoint that you can look at called the qualitative research proposal, and I'd like you to look at that. It goes more into detail about a proposal, but I really wanted to talk about this slideshow so you could see the differences, what you could take from IRB and what you maybe should leave out. So the first difference between an IRB application and a research proposal is that the IRB is designed for a different purpose than the proposal. The IRB is designed to ensure that all research involving human subjects carried out under the auspices of UNC conforms to ethical standards. So it's looking at the principles of ethics, which are respect for individuals, beneficence, and justice. So everything in there is asking questions about how you're treating the people in your study, your participants, how you're being fair, how you're protecting confidentiality and things like that. A research proposal, the main purpose is to show that your study is significant, that you have a reason to conduct your study, and that the method you're going to use is suitable and feasible. A lot of the things in both the IRB and proposal are similar, but usually the proposal is more detailed, so it's a longer paper. In the sections, there's some similarities and differences as well. So the IRB has listed different sections, and I want you to list those sections just exactly the way they're lettered in the handbook that you have. And so it talks about the purpose, the methods, the risks, discomforts, and benefits, the costs and compensation, the grant information, and asks you to list some appendices like the consent form and a list of potential questions and possible permission that you may need from organizations like schools. The proposal has an introduction and a literature review and a methodology and analysis section, and then references and appendices. The format is completely different. The format of the IRB is there's a cover page, and that's either paper if you're in my class and I'm the one giving you permission, or electronic through IRBnet if you need to go that way. Then there's a paper narrative that you need to write, and you put references right after that narrative, and then you have appendices afterwards like the consent form and so on. You need to use the exact lettering and numbering system that the Procedures for Research Involving Human Participants Handbook specifies. And that outline stays the same, so just follow that outline. The proposal has a title page that comes first, and then it has the body of the proposal that includes the introduction, the literature review, the methodology, the analysis, the references, and come on a separate page after that, and then there's appendices, and throughout the whole paper you have what's called a running head, and that's different on the first page than it is on the rest of the pages. There are several websites that talk about APA 6 format to make a research proposal, and I'll at Purdue is probably the biggest one, and you can use those websites if you have any question about what a proposal is. The purpose versus the introduction. So in the IRB, there's a purpose statement. And what it wants you to do is justify the study. Why do you need to do this study? What's unique about this study? And what are your research questions and hypotheses? Clearly stated. The introduction takes that justification of the study and you develop it a little bit more. So you talk about the problem. You have an introduction paragraph where you state the problem and then you talk about it a little bit. You give a rationale for the study, which is why is this study important? And then you give the significance of this study. You use some literature review in there a little bit and cite some people, but talk about it. An important part of both is the gap. Why is your study unique? That's the reason that you're doing the study. And then you clearly state the research question and hypotheses if you have any on the proposal as well. In the IRB for the purpose or the lit review, you also justify the study, but you don't use very many citations at all. All you do is help support the purpose statement. In the research proposal, you go into much more detail. You define all the keywords that are in your research question. You talk about how those keywords interact. You talk about what's been done with those before. And you talk about what the literature doesn't cover. So you once more emphasize the gap before you finish up your literature review. In the IRB, there's a justification of categories. So you have to decide, or you have to apply for whether or not your research is going to be exempt or expedited or full board, and you have to state the reason for that. There is no justification section in a proposal. The length of the whole purpose statement should be about 1 page or less, and the length for a proposal should be around 2 to 4 pages, including the literature review. In the methods section, there you would have maybe a sentence or two at the most about your theoretical stance and the method, qualitative method you'll use, and you as a researcher and the setting. Yeah, not very much at all, and it goes as part of that purpose statement at the very beginning, the justification, or in the method, I'm sorry. In the proposal, you go very detailed into your theoretical stance. So if you're going to use an interpretivist theoretical stance, why are you using it? What does it mean? What's it all about? Cite some sources. The method is the same way. What kind of method are you going to use? Why are you going to use it? And cite some sources about what it is. The researcher stance is at least a paragraph talking about why you're involved in this research. What does this mean to you? And if you're very involved in it, then how are you going to somehow distance yourself so that you can let the voice of the participant come out? And then you also include a setting in your methodology that you don't include in the IRB very much. In the IRB, you talk about the participants, and that is detailed. You talk about the sampling procedure, the size, the characteristics, the age, whether or not they're vulnerable population, and how the participants will be contacted. You do essentially the same thing in the proposal. The only thing you may not need to address is whether or not they're a vulnerable population. In the IRB, you list the procedures step by step and tell them exactly how you're going to do the study, and you do the same thing in the proposal. In the IRB, there's also an analysis section, and it wants to know how you're going to analyze your data once you collect it. The methodology or the proposal has the same thing. There's an analysis section, and for the proposal you don't have to go into great detail, but it needs to be cited, and you need to explain how you're going to analyze the data. In the IRB, there are also some other sections called data handling, risk, discomforts and benefits, costs and compensation, and grant information. Those are really not separate sections in the proposal, so you don't need to worry about those. Don't do them. The proposal, if it does have grant information, your proposal is probably a grant proposal, so the whole thing is written for a grant, and those are detailed in much different ways than I'm talking to you about right now. Finally, there's a section in the proposal about trustworthiness. So how are you going to make sure that this study is really trustworthy, that people can rely on your data and your findings? And there are 4 sections to trustworthiness that most people accept, and those include confirmability, credibility, dependability, and transferability. You need to explain in a few sentences what each one is and how you propose to make sure that those parts of trustworthiness are actually going to be covered in your study. That's not as important in an IRB. So you may explain a little bit about it, but not very much. The total length of your IRB should be about 2 to 3 pages. The narrative should be about 2 to 3 pages. The total length for your proposal should be 7 to 10, no more than 10 pages. And finally, we have references. For the IRB, you used very few references just to support your narrative, and so you only have 1 to 3, and you should put those directly at the bottom of your narrative. They should be less than 10 years old, but otherwise don't worry about too many references in the narrative. Your references in the proposal should be on a separate page, and you should have enough that you reach saturation, which means there's no new information in what you're reading about your topic. They should also be less than 10 years old. The appendices are about the same in both. You should have the recruitment letter, the consent form, the permission from the organization if you require one, and a list of potential questions that you're going to ask. And that's it. I hope you have fun with your proposal, and if you have any questions, please call me or email me and ask me. Thanks. Bye.